Hey, how's it going? My name is Sam Sauter. I've been a digital marketer and media buyer for the last 8 years of my life. I've had the privilege now of working with 7, 8, and 9-figure brands. I've worked with billion-dollar fund managers, SaaS companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I've worked with some of the biggest coaches, consultants, and personal brands in the world. I've been part of teams many times that we're spending, north of $10,000 a day. The highest ever on one campaign for one offer we were spending was $13,000 a day. Been in doing this a really long time. In today's video, I want to show you we brand that we started with. We were originally spending $300 a day. Now we're spending $3,000 a day. Okay, we're scaling from $3,000 to $10,000 a day. I want to show you the roadmap, the systems, and the processes that I've used my entire career to take people from $0 to $10,000 a day. And I just want to walk you through my methodology, my thought process, and everything like that. My background, if you ever want to learn more about that, I have a website called westchannelmedia.com. You can see every case study that I've ever had during the rest of my career. You can check out some of those videos there. Okay, here's some proof for the skeptics. This is just one payment processor, one account for one brand. You can see this is, we crossed 700,000 in sales just on this offer alone. We've scaled that 700,000 you can see here in cash collected. You can see we started at 10K in spend to 16K in spend to 23K in spend to 54 in spend to 56 in spend, all the way up to we're spending $3,000 a day here in August at the time of this recording, all while doing so at a 3.2x ROAS. So you can see we spent 207, generated 729 in cash. Okay, so that's what I'm doing, and that's what I want to share with you guys today. Goal is to give you guys a bunch of key insights that hopefully you can implement in your own business, or just hire us to do it for you. So now here's the common problems you're going to face when you're scaling your paid advertising. What you're going to encounter is that all of your metrics just drop marginally. Okay, your cost per lead is going to climb, your show up rate's going to dissolve, your close rates are going to dissolve. And if you just get chipped away at 20-30% across every single key KPI and step in the funnel, the ROAS can just get destroyed, right? You can have a funnel that's doing a 4 or 5x, but if you have 30% less leads, 30% less show up rate, 30% less close up rate, now you could be dropping below break even and profitability. Okay, so really what I'm doing once I'm operating at a big scale is I have to be more granular, and I have to track things at a much higher degree. Okay, it's like you're driving a car and you're going 20 miles an hour, and then you start driving 200 miles an hour. All of a sudden, small little movements of the wheel can make a massive impact and can flip the vehicle. If you take your eye off the ball for 2 days, sometimes you can erase $20, $30, $40,000 of shareholder value by not keeping your eye on the ball. So the tracking has to get more granular. The cadence of the tracking has to get more granular. And then the department leads, which I'm going to talk about in a second here, the setter team leader, the closer team leader, and the marketing team leads, they have to get reports on a more consistent cadence, okay, to keep costs within profitability. Okay, so the metrics that we're tracking month over month is ad spend, the organic revenue. That's very important. We set up Hyros to make sure that we're not attributing organic sales to paid and scaling spend and watching our bank account dissolve. Okay, we're tracking new high ticket revenue, new high ticket upfront cash collected percentage, low ticket sales, the liquidation percentage. Okay, with all of our clients, I've been running the same model for 6 years of my career. We have high ticket funnels. For those who aren't qualified, they get down to a low ticket. I've been able to, for this offer, liquidate about 20 or 30% of the spend on that downsell. We also have a webinar cleanup where every single person that saw our offer on a sales call didn't buy. They're invited to a free webinar where they see the exact same offer at the smallest tier, pitched at a steep discount after a 2-hour-long webinar presentation. This is a perfect model for your high information buyers. Okay, there's some buyers who will purchase very quickly, need a short phone call, and they're willing to pull the trigger. There are others who are more skeptical, more cautious, more apprehensive, need to do more research. The funnel that I've built over the last 6 years of my life, we've just been running it now for multiple different brands, multiple different offers, is we have a 3-tiered high ticket offer that's presented to them on the phone. We give them a slide deck showing all 3 options, all 3 deliverables, and what that does, it pulls up the AOV on the call funnel, and then that lowest tier package is pitched on that webinar cleanup. We email the entire list, say go back to this webinar. We pitch for 2.5 hours, and we say if you want to join now, you can do so for half the price on that lowest tier. And that adds an additional 20 or 30% of top line, which is a big deal on email traffic that otherwise would have been lost. So between the high ticket, the webinar, and the low ticket, That's how we're typically able to scale to a really higher degree, okay? So we're tracking webinar, we're tracking installments, okay? It's very important. Sometimes you'll have a big month where you do badly in terms of average cash collected, okay? And then you're getting a whole bunch of installments that subsequent month if you have a good product and people complete their payment plans. But then you start scaling outside of profitability because you're not paying attention to your new customer return on advertising spend. You're just looking at the total amount of cash in your company bank account relative to how much you spend, which is a horrible way to look at things, okay? That is a surefire way to destroy yourself, okay? I've seen so many people in our space. Who scaled aggressively, had a tight margin, and let's say they put away 200 grand and they're doing $1 million a month and they only have 200 grand in the company account. I've seen them lose everything they've worked for in 7 months because of one bad month, and all the profit just gets eroded, okay? So now the other thing that I'm tracking is the percentage that changes, okay? This is really important, okay? Typically what you're gonna find is that your earnings per lead or your earnings per qualified lead stays the same or drops marginally as you scale. So if I scale budget 100%, but cost per lead, which is my earlier leading indicator on a call funnel, only goes up 20%, that's accretive for the shareholders. When it's not accretive is when you spend 30% more and your cost per lead raises 30% more. In effect, whatever it is that let's say you increase the budget from $1,000 to $2,000 a day. If you didn't look at that earlier leading indicator, you're spending an additional $1,000 per day to get the same amount of leads effect because your cost per lead raised 20% and your daily spend raised 20%. So that effectively means that you costing this business $30,000 at the end of the month. But an experienced media buyer just looks at the amount of money that's coming in and coming out of the company bank account and not the leading indicators that make up that success. If you're getting a healthy lead cost on a book a call funnel, you're not going to see the revenue come from that for 2 to 4 weeks, okay? So you can't be looking at what's coming in the company account today. The results that you're seeing today are a result of what you did 2 weeks ago. So you look at the early and leading indicators. You have to look at the percent change across every key KPI as you are scaling and see how does that look net to how much you are scaling, okay? All right, so we look at the new customer revenue, return on the new customer revenue. This is the total amount of new customer revenue collected without organic. We have our total paid ads cash collected return on advertising. So you can see this has been a 3.2 since inception. Okay, you can see it's actually dropping now as we're scaling a little bit in August. It's actually a 2.0, okay? The reason for that is we're scaling up. As you scale up, you're gonna see the ROAS drop down because it takes a couple weeks for it to catch up, okay? Now, we track revenue, okay? Or we track the total paid ads cash collected because that's important, but we also wanna track the new customer cash collected ROAS without installments. If you have big installments or big payment plans coming in, you probably don't want to be attributing that and using that as a signal that it's time to scale, okay? Then you also want to look at the percentage change in new customer cash collected ROAS. This is a business that I have a high degree of conviction in terms of our ability to collect the cash. You can see here, we have collected 89.81% of the total cash since inception. Okay, so I pretty much know that if I'm running a 3.2x ROAS on revenue, not cash, I know that there's a likelihood I'm going to get 90% of that, but it might not come over 30, 69 days. So if you scale on revenue, that's how you're going to get underwater. What you want to look at is your new customer cash collected on cash. Okay, unless you want to be incredibly aggressive and do that, I wouldn't recommend doing that. That's a bit risky at scale. You're risking your company's livelihood. That if you have one blip in the radar or something goes wrong, you're playing at a very tight margin for it. I'd only recommend doing that if you have a high risk tolerance, high cash reserves, and the ability to weather a small downturn in performance. Okay. So I track the percentage change in the cost per qualified lead, the average daily spend change. So you can see here what I've done so far in August is I've actually scaled from, okay, so here, this was a great example, okay? This was a bad month here in July. You can see here, my average daily spend increase was 4%. So I only increased budget by 4%, but cost per qualified lead increased by 60%. Now here's what's incredible. See how amazing this is? As a result of doing that, in this month, I'm punished in August, because remember, 2 to 4 week sales cycle, and you saw about a 60% decrease in the return on advertising spend, right? So you can see it go from 2.4 to 1.7. That's almost a 60% increase. How fantastic is that? It's not fantastic for me, the business owner, but how predictable is this, right? It's probabilities and math and statistics are so accurate, and advertising is really a lesson on probability, statistics, and math, okay? So let's take a look at, and you can see here we've gone from $300 a day to just shy of $2,600 per day. So almost a 10x increase in spend as we are running this account here, okay? We track the cost per qualified lead, change in price, the percentage of qualified leads that books, the percentage of qualified leads that turn into a live call, and the qualified lead to close rate, okay? Starting in July, we implemented a strategy called, Jeremy Haynes would call it like the hammer them strategy, and this is where you're gonna run engagement campaigns, so video view campaigns, to the people who book calls, okay? So there's a 14-day sales cycle to a 30-day sales cycle. After somebody books a call, they're added to a custom audience. That email is added to a custom audience on Facebook. And then for 14 days, every single day, we're serving them 15 unique pieces of content. We're owning their entire newsfeed during that 14-day window where they're making a decision with us. And what you can see is that our average conversion rate on leads went from 4% to 8% on qualified bookings, which is astronomical. We're only allocating 10% additional spend. Okay, this is called the hammer them strategy, okay, from Jeremy Haynes. He pioneered that. You can see 10% of the total budget is being allocated to that strategy, but it had a doubling in terms of our throughput on this back end of the sales process, okay, from lead to close, okay? Obviously, your cost per lead is going to go up 10%, but we had a doubling on the back, so it was accretive for the shareholders, okay? Now, the reason that things are really not trending in the right direction for us at this moment in time is that cost per qualified lead. So you can see here, cost per qualified lead rose 29% and then 57%. Now, starting in August, we increased our cadence of creative production, and you can see here that those costs stabilized, but it's still pretty bad. We have to get it below $100 cost per lead because our earnings per qualified lead is about $200, okay, on the initial upfront cash collected, and I don't like to go below 2 to 1 on upfront cash collected for this product line. If I want to be really aggressive, and I call this like dirty bulking, okay, dirty bulking is kind of a terminology they use in bodybuilding, which is, it's kind of implying this thing that like when you're scaling in bodybuilding, you're trying to gain weight, you're also going to gain some fat, okay? I know that my margins and my return on ad spend is going to go down at scale, but sometimes you have to kind of push into the unknown, break it, have the margins break to get that data, to make those conversion optimizations to the funnel, to then once you cut back from that point, you then can have a lot more margin because you kind of flirted with the upper range limits there, and you got so much data and so much feedback rather quickly that when you did pull back, you knew which channels, which segments of your campaigns were not profitable. You could cut back, and then you could have a big increase in your profitability, okay? Sam Ovens, Consulting.com, famously, they were doing about $33 million a year on $1 million in profit. Insane, right? And then the next year, I want to say they did like $14 million in top line, and then they did like $8 million in profit, okay, because they did a harsh cut. Does that make sense? So it's very, very hard to scale if you want to retain your margin. You have to sacrifice your margin if you want to do a bulk month. But what you can also do is like, if you don't need the money, if you don't have a huge lifestyle that you have to expense from the company, you can keep all the money in the company and say, I don't need this for a year, and you can dirty bulk. You can spend 100% of the money and just watch it compound in the bank account, right, every single month, and then only extract quarterly or whatever. I knew a guy who spent 18 months, didn't take any money out of the company. He averaged a 3x return on advertising spend. He put $10,000 into a company account, never took it out for 18 months. And then at the big end, he had an entity that was kicking off $150,000 of cash flow off of about $1 million in revenue. You see how that works versus somebody like myself. I was a bit more conservative in my agency career. I wanted to have a base financially that freed me up to take risks. I'm fortunate now I'm in the position where my own personal investments cover my living expenses because I took all those cash reserves out of the business. But I look at some of my friends who reinvested everything and scaled much further. I also have friends, candidly, that reinvested everything, got to $1 million a month, but they only had 50 to 100 grand a month in cash reserves. And then they had a bad month, you know, COVID or whatever happened, and they took a 20 or 30% haircut on their ROAS, and they lost $100,000. So they went through that 18-month journey, paid themselves nothing, and lost everything. So that was too fearful for me. I err more on the side of conservativeness, okay? Because I don't want to risk capital loss, okay? But you have to know your risk tolerance, your cash reserves, how bad you need the money, and go from there, okay? So, all right, so that's everything that's happening there, okay? You guys pretty much get all these metrics here. Now, how do you scale? When we were spending about $1,500 a day, we originally, our fixed costs were at $35K a month, but we're kind of beefing up now because we're building the team that's going to get us from $200K a month to $1 million a month. Okay, we made those hires a bit early, but we met somebody that we thought was exceptional for a couple key roles. And we thought, we don't want to lose you. We want to buy you right now. We want to lock in that trade and keep you in the company and have you stay here. So we're a bit overstaffed. We have about $45K of fixed expenses for a $200K average cash collected business, which is a bit high in my opinion. But again, this is the team that's going to, there doesn't need to be any additional fixed costs incurred to get us to $1 million a month. So we're comfortable with our head count right now. We don't need to make any changes. But look at how this math plays out, okay? So look, at $1,500 a day in average spend, you're going to spend 45 grand a month. These are the ROAS. This is the ROAS that varies from week to week for us. So at any given month, I would say our ROAS fluctuates from 4.5 to 1.5. Okay, I know that's a bit of a range. It really never drops below 2.2, but I'm being really conservative here, okay? I've seen it go as low as 2.2 to when we're like really scaling and we know that, you know, kind of on weekends we have a bit of a lull. So if you calculate it then, and when we're scaling aggressively on the weekend leading up to a week, it could be as low as 2.2. Or it could come after a Thursday or Friday when we've had a 4 or 5 good day stretch. Okay, maybe we're pulling back a little bit of spend before the weekend. I've seen it as high as a 4.5 to a 5, right? Now, if I'm spending 45 grand a month, my break-even ROAS, let's just go through this line really quick first. 45K in spend, 2.8 ROAS, 128K in cash, 20% sales team commission. I'm rounding up. I'm trying to be very conservative. It's really close to 15%. There's a $50,000 fixed fee to run the business, okay? The payment processor, we owe them about 3%. Again, I'm being a bit more conservative. It's really closer to like 2%, I think. And then that leaves you the profit and loss. So approximately our break-even ROAS, when we're spending $1,500 a day, is 2.8. That's where we have to be. We can't be any worse than that, okay? Now, if I'm spending $2,000 a day, the fixed costs become a smaller percentage of the overall budget that you're allocating. So you actually only need to achieve a 2.4x ROAS if you spend $2,000 a day. Okay, see how that works. Now, if you want to spend $3,000 a day like we are right now, our break-even ROAS is actually 2.0. Okay, I think when people start seeing the math here, they get more comfortable. They know, well, holy shit, you know, my break-even's at a 2, I'm at a 3, spending 3 grand a day. I can go up to 4 grand a day, right? If my cost per lead doesn't drop, you know, 20 or 30%, I'm probably good, right? Because you want to look at the earlier leading indicators. You should know your earnings per qualified lead, and you should also know your cost per qualified lead. So as you're scaling, you can say, hey, I'm at a 3.2, break-even's 2.0. Let's push it by 50%. Push the budget by 30, 40, 50% over 2 days. I never really scale more than 20 or 30% a day. And then, but if my cost per lead only raised 20%, that was accretive, most likely for the shareholder, but you have to wait and see how that pans out, okay? Now, so that's kind of how you have to do it mathematically and cash flow perspective. Now, when I'm in the red, you need to pull back budget, okay? Whenever you scale, you're scaling, you're going to colder traffic, it's always going to convert less. Okay, so by you pulling back budget, you're usually going to see a bump in overall ROAS, okay? When I'm in yellow land, okay, from 2 to 3, that's like your red line. Like you're close to losing money, but you're not, okay? So you can either choose to do more conversion rate optimization, more ads, more funnel optimization, more tweaks, more sales process improvements, and try and get it from a 2.2 to a 3.4, okay? Or what you can do is you can try and gas it and say, I want to scale faster, I want to spend more, I'm willing to go and flirt with this, okay, to get that data faster, and then you have more data to do conversion rate optimization. Because when I'm spending 10 grand a day, I get the same amount of data that if I'm spending $300 a day in a month. I can run 10 split tests a day on that landing page, and it's all statistically significant, okay? So sometimes it makes sense, depending on your risk tolerance, your cash reserves, where you are in the business, it makes sense to spend the money faster, okay? Now, what was I going to say here? Now, for this business, the reason we're spending so aggressively, like I'm trying to push it as much as I can, kind of hanging out right in here, like this 2 to 2.5 range. The reason for that is because if we lose 15K and say we really screw up, like really screw up, I do a 1.8x ROAS, that's like really hard for me to do. I've been at a 3.2 this whole time. For me to be at a 1.8, I'm okay losing 15 grand, truthfully, because the scale that we're operating at, we have multiple six figures in the company, okay, accounts. We're more than comfortable losing that to get that data faster. Okay, so that's the way you want to think about it. Basically, all of advertising and scale, what you're going to notice is you have a spread, your break-even ROAS and your current ROAS. And most people don't even know those two numbers, okay? And if they do, they're calculating it wrong. They're looking at last month installments. They're using that to count. You can't just look at when the money's reconciling in the account. You have to look at installments, new cash, old cash. That all has to factor in. As you scale, spread compresses. Then you have to do CRO to widen the spread. You scale again, it compresses, okay? Now the goal, you should really make the goal to scale as much as humanly possible, and then you can focus on efficiency when you want to, okay? That's a personal decision. But I know that if I push something to $1 million a month, I'm going to get so much data that if I fall back down to $500,000 a month and I want to choose to start taking money off the table, I don't want to keep gambling. I don't want to be on this hamster wheel. I'm going to be much more profitable than if I just slowly scale to $500,000 a month. Does that make sense? All right. Let's also talk about ad account structure. Okay. I've talked about this many times on my channel and how we run ad accounts. We use one business objective per campaign per country. So what does that mean? It means that I'm not like, let's say I run a book a call funnel, okay? I'm not gonna have like a top of funnel campaign and a middle funnel campaign and a bottom of funnel campaign and for the US, right? And I'm not gonna have a bunch of ABO ad sets. No, I'm not gonna do any of that. What you're gonna find is if you have one CBO campaign, it's my personal opinion, my opinion's gone back into this a couple of times, and I know media buyers that I respect a lot that disagree with me. But my personal belief is you can put all of your high quality ads inside of one ad set, one CBO campaign. And those ads will retarget naturally for you. And what Meta will do for you is it'll find that some ads in that ad set, if you give it the freedom to do its thing, it'll find that certain ads do great for prospecting, like kind of doing the top of funnel awareness, and then other ads do a really good job of putting in the last couple of touch points to get that conversion event. So if you scale up and you put more ads inside of that ad set, it's giving it more options, it's giving it more variability. And here's what's interesting. Some ads will appeal to different segments of the marketplace. So some ads have different messaging, different spokespeople that capture different audiences. And by using CBO, you're giving it the flexibility for it to spend as much as humanly possible across all those ads, but it's not forcing every ad to spend more weight than it's comfortable carrying. So it's like, this ad right here, ad C, might appeal to this whole other unique segment and group, okay? But even though it's not getting more than 20 or 30% of the budget, it's still playing its role, it's still carrying some weight. And a lot of marketers and media buyers, they think, oh, well, if I just switch to ABO and I spent all my budget on that thing that's only getting a little bit of spend because it has a good cost per lead, then my cost per lead is going to drop. And that's just not been my experience. You want to look at your overall blended across the entire campaign, not the ad set, not the ad level. What is my blended cost per lead? Okay? And as you scale up with that CBO structure, what you're going to find is some ads get a little bit of spend, some ads get a lot of spend. Typically, the ad that is getting a lot of spend, it might not even have the lowest cost per lead. But you might find that it has a lower frequency, meaning that it's appealing to a wider demographic. So it's appealing to a wider demographic, so it's not hitting the same person multiple times. Does that make sense? Now, this plays into another really important factor, which is understanding different levels of awareness, okay? So in order to scale your ads, you need to have unique messaging, unique ads, unique angles, unique spokespeople that capture different segments of the market. Most people have one ad, one messaging, one pocket that works, and let's say that audience could only support $2,000 a day in spend. They keep trying to pump more of that ad towards that audience. You don't want to do that. You want to try and create a whole separate audience. And remember, the messaging is what creates the audience. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a unique message that's going to capture a different segment of the marketplace. You're going to notice that CBO campaign, the frequency drops because now it has different assets, and those assets are capturing different audience segments, and your overall frequency and your overall cost per result across the entire campaign blended drops. And now typically if that frequency that drops and that cost per lead drops, you can scale again 20 or 30% that next day and notice where your cost per result, notice how it changes there. Do you see how that makes sense there? So let's get a little bit more sophisticated, okay? If you read, I think it's Eugene Schwartz, his book called what is it called? I want to say it's like breakthrough advertising or something. I might be totally butchering that, but there's a very famous book in our space that talks about the different levels of sophistication within any given audience, okay? Now, let's say we're selling ambulance insurance, okay? We had an account that a friend of ours was managing. They were spending like $20,000 or $30,000 a day on this account, okay? Now, 3% of any given market is what's called most aware. They're like ready to buy. They are the in-market demographic. That is the 3% that's ready to buy right now. 97% is not there, okay? So if you run an ad right now on Meta, the AI is so sophisticated and so successful that if you run an in-market messaging of ad, it will capture the in-market demographic without any targeting instructions. That's why Meta is one of the most powerful advertising platforms still in 2025. They're so far ahead in the AI and the machine learning because of the first movers advantage they had and the billions of dollars of hundreds of billions of dollars of advertising budget that got pumped through the platform. Despite the worst user experience ever on Facebook, I think they're still keeping up just because of their ad platform is just so superior. Okay, I think all the other platforms are going to have a tough time capturing that, or catching up to them rather. But that's a separate point. But my point is that you're going to have the highest probability, the highest amount of success advertising if you start by trying to capture the in-market demographic. So you can use messaging like, if you've been shopping around for different types of ambulance coverage and ambulance insurance because you know how important it is, you schedule a call with us. Okay, that's pretty bad copy, but you get my point. The key messaging in there is if you've been shopping around. That is somebody that's in shopping around. They are in market. They are buying right now. Okay. Now, if you spend now this might get you to $2,000 a day, or $1,000 a day, or $3,000 a day. But for you to go to $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a day, you have to kind of go to the unaware state. You have to go to the problem aware. So you can say something like, "Did you know that one emergency ride to the hospital could leave you with a $3,000 bill if you're not covered?" Boom. Now you're capturing a whole other segment of the audience of this market that is not necessarily even thinking about buying it. They just know that they have a problem. Okay. So that's the way that you want to be thinking about it, okay, is you need to scale to these wider levels of awareness, okay? And that's how you're going to be able to spend more, okay? You might find that this ad right here, get ambulance insurance, is very high returning in this campaign structure that we have. But what you're going to find is that it doesn't get the same amount of spend. And then you're going to be frustrated and you're going to say, well, if I spent more on this ad, would my cost per lead go down? No, it's not the case. Facebook is spending all of your budget on this ad because it's smarter than you. And it knows that even though your cost per lead is $30 with this ad, it can reach 20 times more people than this ad right here. So what Facebook is trying to do is they're trying to see what is your best performing ad at scale. At scale. Okay? So the ad account structure is very simple. It's one CBO campaign. We're launching ads. Okay? We're being very cognizant of the messaging. If I have a winning messaging, I'm going to spend 80% of my time going towards that messaging unless I'm consciously trying to move into some of these other levels of awareness, okay? And what you're going to find is some ads get allocated a bunch of spend and some ads do not. If something doesn't get allocated any spend, it's Meta's way of saying, hey, I looked at the early leading indicators of this ad. People aren't scrolling on it. They're not stopping their scroll. They're not clicking on this. I don't even want to spend more money on this. It's not working. And it just saved you a lot of money that if you went ABO and you said, I'm going to force Facebook to spend it. Okay? So what you want to do is if it doesn't spend any money, just shut it off. If it does start spending a lot of money, that's great. And now it's like another member of the team that can carry some weight. Like my goal is I want 20 unique ads that are very high performing, okay, that won in a bunch of split tests and has been optimized to the wazoo, okay? And I want it to hold its own weight. I want all those 20 ads, they can hold their different weights. If I have a female spokesperson with winning messaging, that would be a way for me to capture the whole female marketplace and the whole female demographic. And I could take the winning messaging and the winning concept that worked for that same messaging in the male demographic and run to a female demographic. And then I could also, if I wanted to, take that, if the female demographic was working, I could decide either I could go from United States to the Big Four. I could go to like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, some of those more like affluent English-speaking countries. That could be a split test that I could run, okay, but I would probably put that in a lower probability bet. Or I could say, all right, I'm going to stick in my ICP, which I think is in my country, and I'm now going to do the African-American and the Hispanic female audience with that same messaging. And then you'll unlock another whole level of scale because you have a concept and you have a messaging that can capture that audience. You see how this works here? So you scale by messaging, you scale by creative, you scale by capturing all these unique pockets. Okay, so what's interesting here is that with this particular ad set, I have one ad that's supporting about 20% of the budget, then this one's holding 20 or 30% of the budget, and my overall blended cost per lead is very, very low than if I forced them to spend individually. Or even worse, if I forced the one that had a very good cost per lead at small scale to spend at high scale. That's when you're going to see your performance tank, okay? So I launch challenging DCTs. I upload a DCT into my CBO. That gives me multiple different image, headline, body copy variations. If it gets spend, great. If it doesn't, I just shut it off, move on to the next test, okay? And then I also run some lead nurture campaigns. It's the one exception that I do. So if somebody books a call, they're going to get targeted with 20 to 30 pieces of unique long-form content so that during that sales cycle, they're getting warmed up. This is very different from direct response copy style of advertisement. That type of copy is much more direct response-y. These are more organic pieces of content that I know are going to lubricate the sales cycle if consumed. So I'm typically in my lead nurture campaigns post-booking have about a 30 to 50x frequency on those campaigns. That means that for my people, if you work with us, if you work with our agency, your dream customers will have consumed 40 pieces of your content during your sales cycle. How much higher of a likelihood would you have in converting these opportunities if they consume 50 pieces of content before speaking with you? That's a big reason why people can't scale on paid advertising is because they don't have the warmth, they don't have the level of consumption than they do on their organic. But your organic doesn't scale because it's not as predictable as paid ads. You know X amount of dollars lead to X amount of impressions, okay? So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to share with you guys today. This is also a really important template that I've just used throughout my whole career, okay? Which is basically, we have 4 key departments if we're specifically thinking about in terms of acquisition. I typically have my CSM function here as well, but I have marketing metrics, setting metrics, and sales metrics. The marketing metrics are ad spend, leads, qualified leads, cost per lead. Setting team looks at calls booked, cost per booking, show up rate, live call, qualified lead to live call rate, cost per live call, offers made, offer rate. Those are setting team metrics. They're responsible for that. Sales team metrics, I look at high ticket deals, 1, total cash collected, total revenue, average package price, average upfront cash collected, close rate, commissions owed. And then I look at the fixed costs in the P&L. So VAs update this every single day for me. And then we drop in a sales channel for all the leadership. So we have the marketing team lead, the setting team lead, the sales team lead, and the finance team lead, and everybody's on the same page. Now we have color coded with inside of that Google Sheet. We have 3 colors. Yellow means we're an average. Red means we're underperforming. We're outside of KPI. Green means we're healthy. We're above average. We're inside of KPI. And then every day, my sales team manager, if they are the constrainer, they're outside of KPI, they need to respond to that Slack channel. What is their plan to get back within KPI? Does that make sense? So you have to increase the cadence much, much faster when you're operating at this level of scale. Does that make sense? I also should have year to date here. So month to date, week to date, year to date, okay? When I'm sometimes spending $10,000 or $12,000 a day, there's certain marketing metrics that are actually tracked hourly, if you can believe that. So everything has to increase fast. Everything that you're doing, the cadence and the feedback loops have to increase faster. If you're driving 200 miles an hour, you have to check your steering wheel. You have to look out the front windshield much faster than if you're driving 10 miles an hour. 10 miles per hour, you can get by checking text messages and looking down for like 2 seconds. If you're driving 200 miles an hour, you can't fall asleep at the wheel. I've seen media buyers waste companies millions of dollars a year by not having the cadence and the feedback loops fast enough, okay? So that's pretty much everything that I have to say. I'll just kind of quickly summarize everything that we went through today. If you're noticing at scale, as you try and scale from 3K a day to 10K a day, that all of your metrics dissolve gradually, number one is you need to get really clear on your data month over month, year over year. You need to know all of these key metrics that we talked about today. Do not pay attention to your current cash in, cash out for that month and ad spend to calculate your ROAS. You need to look at new customer upfront cash collected. And then you need to know what a customer is worth for you. You need to know what is your bottom that you will tolerate, okay? I do not scale on revenue. I don't even look at revenue, ROAS. That's ridiculous. You need to look at cash ROAS. But you also should have healthy I look at revenue as a company, it's an important metric, but not when scaling. Because if your revenue is not coming for 30, 60, 90 days and you're spending $10,000 a day, you're going to get in a cash flow crunch and you're going to run your company into the dirt. Okay, so you need to know your ROAS, not just your ROAS, it's a stupid metric. You need to know your new customer cash ROAS, your overall company cash ROAS that includes both current customers and new customers. You need to know your revenue ROAS. You need to know your average percentage of revenue that you collect, what percentage of payments get defaulted on, okay? And then you need to know the percent change, okay, as you're scaling up and down. You need to know your cost per qualified lead, and you need to know your average daily spend increase, okay? If you notice that you scale 30%, but your cost per qualified lead increases 4%, that's a great, hold it, okay? But the problem is where people, they want to scale so badly, but they're not looking at the early leading indicators. They'll scale 30%. Let's say they're going from $3,000 a day to $4,000 a day, okay? That's a 30% scale, roughly, okay? And then their cost per lead increases by 30%, okay? Well, if you continue that behavior and you wait 30 days before you make a media buying decision to pull back spend, if your earnings per qualified lead stays the same, you just cost that business $30,000 in a month. This is why I'm so frustrated when companies come to us and they say, oh, well, you guys are not as expensive. Like, let's say one agency's worth $2,000 a month, we're closer to 5, 6, 7. Okay, it depends on your business entirely what we quote you at. But we're talking about a difference of $3,000 or $4,000. I see so many glaring holes in ad accounts that are costing people hundreds of thousands of dollars a month when you're operating at scale. Like, who gives a shit? It's an inconsequential cost to the business when you're operating at scale. You're driving 200 miles an hour. Are you really going to nickel and dime over a couple $1,000s when you're talking about the person that's going to influence hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue in your business? It makes no sense. Then what you need to do is you need to calculate your break-even ROAS with the table that you have here. Yellow means you're you're flirting with danger. Red means you're hemorrhaging money, okay? Blue should be, this is our average ROAS, okay? This means you can start to scale, okay? If you're in the green zone or you're in the purple zone, scale, okay? Scale, scale, scale as long as the early and the leading indicators look good. If you're above the purple, then just scale aggressively, okay? And don't even worry about it until it falls back into blue. And then after it falls back into blue, you're going to do conversion rate optimization to improve the metrics, and then you're going to be good, okay? The ad account structure, everybody wants to know what the ad account structure is. Have one campaign. We're typically optimizing for the schedule event on a book a call funnel. You're going to have one optimization event per country that you're targeting, okay? And you're going to have a CBO campaign within that campaign, and you're going to upload new ads every single week that are new concepts or messaging variations of what was working or what was winning or what was getting allocated the highest amount of spend last week, okay? Or conversely, you're going to launch new challenging ad sets every single week that are aimed at capturing a new pocket, a new segment of the marketplace. So you can do that through a new spokesperson or you can do it through new messaging. We prefer to do it. It depends entirely on the business and the customer profile and the ICP, but you have to think about where can I scale that's going to give me the highest probability of success, has the least amount of work, highest probability of success, and highest perceived improvement, the highest upward scale potential. Okay, so for us, for instance, right now we're scaling to different countries. The reason we're doing that is I give it about a 50, 60, 70% chance of those big 4 countries hitting. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start, versus I think I'm going to have diminishing returns within my existing country, even if I start scaling towards different messaging pockets, okay? So I chose to take those winning existing messaging concepts that were geared towards the in-market demographic and taking those to other countries because I thought that had a high probability bet, as opposed to if I start scaling to this other, maybe a problem aware or maybe a completely unaware segment of that audience, might see a drop in my ROAS. So I already have something that's working. I have a sales team that's based in the US. It could come and bite me back. Could come bite me in the ass later because they are now selling at time zones. Like your show up rate is going to really suffer if you don't have a lot of available time slots with those other countries. But that's still the bet that we chose to make because I have a lot of conviction in that in-market messaging that I started with on this account. We started here, right? Just put a clear offer in front of somebody that's already in market, right? That's where you should start if you're already in business, okay? Unless you're inundated by competitors, you need to have some differentiation there, okay? And then ultimately what you have to do is you have to create a new in-market demographic by targeting the problem-aware and the completely unaware audience. Otherwise, you're going to keep depleting this, and you're going to see your ROAS dip over time, okay? You're always going to have a higher ROAS in the beginning because typically the offer pool, that in-market demographic pool, it's a bit of a fresher offer, and it's always going to perform well in the beginning. So as you erode this little pocket here, you have to start scaling with your messaging to go broader, more problem-aware, okay? Have a simple ad account structure that allows everything to spend as much or as little as it wants. Shut off the things that aren't getting any spend. Try and look at the things that are spending a lot. Launch more similar ads to that, or be very intentional and launch a new messaging pocket, okay? Increase the cadence of your daily reporting. Every day have the VA fill out month to date, week to date, year to date, and today's date on all the key KPIs. Color code it. Green for overperforming, yellow with an average, red with an outside of KPI. And every single day, the team lead has to respond to that Slack message, what they're doing today to get back into KPI if they're not already, okay? So just keep solving this constraint as you scale and just get really, really tight, fast feedback loops, okay? Now, what's next? Okay, this is a beautiful slide, isn't it? But so if you're making more than 100 grand a month, just DM me on Instagram at HeySamSauter. We typically work with people that want to diversify, so we're really good at a bunch of different channels. So like we're good at Meta, YouTube, LinkedIn, PPC. LinkedIn's a really big one for our business, actually. But nonetheless, let's say you have one platform or one channel that's already working for you, okay? If you want us to look at potentially taking that channel over for you, great. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm already happy with my existing media buyer or my existing in-house marketing team, then we don't have to replace him, but we can do a separate channel that gives you some diversification. So it can really add a lot of stability to your business if you're not super reliant on Meta. If you can also have Meta and YouTube and PPC. Now, it depends on the context of your business. Sometimes it's better to focus on one channel, but if you get really big, call it 8 figures, that's when I would start diversifying your acquisition, okay? Making more than 100 grand a month, DM me at HeySamSauter, or you can go to my website. It's at westchannelmedia.com. So I'll just pull that up really quickly. It's West Channel Media. You go to westchannelmedia.com, you can schedule a call with my team here, okay? You can watch some of our case studies here. You can see some of the people in our industry have left us testimonials. There's a few big names in here that have left some testimonials, so you can see what their opinion is of working with us. And then lastly, just schedule a call here if you want to talk to us. Now, if you're doing less than 100 grand a month, then just DM me at HeySamSauter, and you will be a candidate for our Done With You consulting. Okay, so most of our done for you resources are team's time, energy, and effort. It makes sense to only work with businesses doing a minimum of 100 grand a month. Ideally, we want to work with businesses that are doing more than $1 million a month, okay? But if you're doing less than 100 grand a month, then we have Done With You consulting where I can help you get it to 100 grand a month. Okay, and then you become a candidate, you have profit, and you can reinvest in this, growth partner where we can help you take it to the next level. So anyway, hope that was helpful. That's how I think about scaling companies, scaling ad spend. If that was helpful, shoot me a message, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.